Welcome back. In this section of the course, we're going to get into the analysis tools before progressing to the various forms of editing. And that's a natural progression because you have to do the analysis before you can do the edits. Because at the end of any analytical process, whatever it is you're analyzing is either going to be okay or not okay. And if it's not okay, then you set about editing that. So we're going to start with the analysis, and that's going to break into two general families. We're going to have qualitative and quantitative. Now that's my way of grouping it. Those terms don't show up anywhere in the Steinberg literature. But what I mean by that is you have some tools that are very hardcore mathematical in nature, and then you've got some tools that are much more subjective in nature, specifically the various meters and the sound itself. So we're going to start with the more scientific or mathematical component, and that's the global analysis tool. So what we have in this project is just a basic pop song here at the moment, and play through a couple of bars of that. Okay, so standard stuff there. And we're going to come over to we're in the audio editor. We're going to come to the Analyze tab. And let's take a look at the general families of stuff that we've got here. We've got 3 entries under the Tools category. Then we have the Monitoring category with a whole bunch of selections. And then some floating meters and update stuff over to the side. What I want to look at first is this option for global analysis. And it's going to, when we click this, it's going to call up an analysis window. And the first thing you'll notice is at the top it says no analysis. We haven't done anything yet. So again, clicking the button, this is another example where, like with the record dialog, clicking the button doesn't do anything but call up the next dialog in the sequence. And once we do our analysis, we're going to be able to look at 5 different aspects of it here, which we get to through these tabs: the peaks, loudness, pitch, errors, and so forth. And then at the bottom is going to be a hot points navigation area, and this is actually pretty cool. And you'll notice that that's common to all of these different modes. So the first step here is to pick out what it is we want to analyze. This will default to the active waveform here in the blue highlighted tab, and we'll simply click the Analyze button. And now we can see in the window at the top, it's telling us which file it is that the analysis has been conducted upon. And if we look at the first one that comes up, peaks, it's going to tell us, it's pretty straightforward what it's telling you: the digital and true peaks at the cursor location, the number that it's reporting, and you can set this to whatever value you want. You can go over and get a mathematical readout of the various loudness aspects, and when we get to the meters, we'll review the EBU 128 standard here in just a couple of minutes. We can get average pitch for this piece of music, left to right. There's some extra stuff in here like the DC offset, and DC offset is such a minor component most of the time. The only time DC offset's really going to be an issue for you is if you're, most likely, if you're swapping files to another region of the world that uses a different power standard than the US, or different from wherever you're working. For example, North America uses AC power that's modulated at 60 cycles per second, and Western Europe uses 50 cycles per second. And DC offset is generated as usually a function of the influence of the power supply. So sometimes when you're moving files, say between New York and London, or 2 parts of the world with different power bases, you may have some, but you can see the reason it goes out to the thousandth point in decimal places here is it's a very minor component, and it's DC offset, something you're never likely to hear. This is something that you would have to get into the analytics to actually see and then to remove. And there's a function later to pull it out if you need to do it. And then finally, you've got a tab for errors here. And again, you can determine how many that you want to report, how much space between possible clipped samples, and so forth and so on. So the data that it's actually telling you here is pretty straightforward. What I want to take just a moment and point out is if we go to, let's just go back to peaks. In any of these fields up here, the blue analytical fields, if I click on one of those, you'll notice that the hot point selector or navigator at the bottom goes active. And it says there are 4 hot points that match that value. And I can use this tool to navigate left to right. And if you look down in the waveform display, as I move from one hot point to the other, and really a hot point is just areas in the song which match whatever you have highlighted up above here. And it'll call those out. So if we go to, we'll say where we're at, and I say, this value of minus 0.3081 decibels, that occurs 4 times in the song, and I can scroll between them here. Now, if I pick this one out, you can see it's right before the 22nd point. And then you can take the option here to focus on that. There it is. And it's going to minimize the analysis dialog and zoom the waveform in to see in a much higher level of magnification that specific hot point. And then you click focus again, and it'll pull you back out to where you were. So as you find points of interest throughout the song or whatever it is that you're analyzing, if you want to see the momentary loudness of that value, which occurs 5 times, you can click to each of them, hit the focus button, and zoom right in on that point of the song. And since this particular one is a loudness value, we can change our meter here in the bottom. And it doesn't like that because we're zoomed in too close. But that's a great way to move around and find the specific areas that you want to zero in on and maybe make some corrections and so forth and so on. Then if you want to add a second analysis here, you can do that to other files and so forth. The last thing that I want to say is that you can save your setup as a preset here. So if you find yourself configuring things like the number of peaks, the number of time between, certain settings that'll work well for music, then maybe others for narration or some other form of analysis that you're doing. After you've gone through and tweaked all those, you can save your analysis setup as a preset and make it easy to get back to in the future. So that's the nuts and bolts of the global analysis tool, which especially for finding errors and things like DC offsets, stuff that you can't really hear any other way, it's an excellent tool. The second one over here is the audio file comparator. And again, we click that, it's going to call up a dialog. The first thing that we have to do is pick out 2 files to compare, and they have to be active in the project that you're working on. So we'll take sample song 1 and sample song 2, and those are over here on these other 2 tabs. And then I'm going to have it go ahead and generate a delta file. So it's going to do a mathematical comparison of those 2 waveforms, those 2 files. And after it's done with that, you'll see an additional tab pop up. So at the moment, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 tabs here. It'll create a 5th. And the only thing in that 5th tab is going to be the deltas or the differences between the first 2. So we go ahead and hit OK. And it says, wow, those are different. And it found 124,000 differences between the two files. And those have been compiled here in this last tab, newly created tab. And if you listen through it, it's going to sound really weak and inaudible because it's only going to play the subtle phase differences, or not phase differences necessarily, but whatever it found that was different between the 2 files. And that can be particularly useful if, let's say you're trying to troubleshoot why something is sounding different in another location or through a different setup. You can take something that should be a perfect digital transfer from one system to another, but it's just not quite sounding right on the other end. You can compare the original from your facility with whatever, say, the client or the end user had, do a comparison, see where the deltas are, and start zeroing in on what either they're doing to it or what's different between the 2. It's a fairly specific tool, but it's one of those, if you need that tool, nothing else will do. And if you don't need that tool, almost any of these others will do. The third one in that tool set is this 3D frequency analysis, which is actually a really cool option. It's going to create a 3D analysis of whatever you have highlighted. So let me select just both channels in this first 25 seconds of the song and hit 3D analysis, and it's going to generate this very cool looking picture. And there's a control wheel in the top where we can scroll around. And this is an FFT, or a fast Fourier transform, that's showing us both time and spectrum and amplitude in one picture. So in the way I have it oriented here, you're seeing frequency up the right-hand side, sort of disappearing into the distance. Time from left to right, so the beginning of the song's over there at the left, and the stop value here at the right. And then let me turn this around so that you're looking more at an end-on spectrum view here. And you can see there's not a whole lot of content down around 20 hertz, nor up here in the dog whistle range. But as you'd expect, there's a pretty dense collection of signal in the middle musical frequencies. And for an awful lot of stuff, just general listening stuff, it's cool to look at. There's not a whole lot of information to be gleaned from it. Where this becomes more usable is in something like this Spectrum Edit demo. We're going to get to this in a couple of chapters. this is some of the real magic that Cubase, that Wavelab can perform, which is to make surgical edits on the spectrum itself. But what we're looking at here is a section from a news interview with a tornado siren in the background. And actually, let me play just a moment of that so you can hear it.
Patient there who matched Will's description. It was not him, we're told. We spoke with the family last.
Okay, I'll play the beginning of that where the siren's even louder.
After hearing of a patient there.
Okay, so I'm going to grab that section, just a component of that, and do a 3D frequency analysis on that. And now everything looks a little clumpier because the section, it's a much smaller piece of audio in terms of time. That's why everything's a little more blown up. But if I rotate this view around to the frequency view now, you can see some really pronounced mountain ranges down there. And especially these two thin fins of blue up at the top, those are the higher harmonics for that tornado siren. So you can see the fundamental tone here, and it's very, very pronounced peaks of those harmonics going up and then back down. And that can give you an opportunity to look at this in a much more easy to interpret fashion than, say, just the two-dimensional frequency analysis here. Now, this spectrum view, all that same information is actually in there. It's just presented in a two-dimensional picture. And until you spend a lot of time using that display, it can be a little hard to figure out what you're actually looking at, whereas this will probably make it a little more intuitive right out. So this, right out of the gate, this view combined with the spectrum editor there are probably what that spectrum editing is probably when you'll use that 3D analysis the most, that or impressing people walking through your studio. So let's go back to our initial piece of pop music here and start looking at the meters around the outside. And one thing that I want to point out as we play this is that unless we do something like here with this one, take a snapshot, the meters are defaulted to clear whenever you stop playback. And this monitoring tool set here gives you the ability to change that. So you can see that the radio button next to playback is highlighted, meaning the meters are going to begin registering during and only during playback. If you wanted to monitor your incoming audio stream, like we are here, now you can see what's coming in through the sound card in real time. You have the option to do that during the rendering process too, which is probably the least used. And then you also have the option here for edit cursor. And what this is going to do is wherever I place the cursor in the, I need cursor and playback. All right, now as we move the cursor around, there we go. We're going to begin to see the meters jump to that part of the song. So it's almost as if it's almost a variant of the freezing the meters, except that you don't have to play through and try to snapshot them or freeze them at just the right split second in time. If you select this edit cursor function, wherever you put the cursor in your song, the meters are going to reflect the data flow at that time. And I would point out that the master section here is the only one not being involved at the moment. It's these others that we have called up, the phase scope and all of these other tools. Those are going to reflect what you're seeing at the point of the cursor there, which is a fantastic analysis tool if you need to zoom in on an area and see what's going on right there, right here, right there, without having to try and play back and catch it and play back and catch it. And then when you're probably most of the time you're going to want to roll in the default configuration of playback here. And then the floating meters tab is grayed out here because we don't have any that are moving around at the moment. But it's basically just it lets you bring them up and get rid of them to keep your workspace cleared out. So that's the nuts and bolts of what's going on in the Analyze tab here and how the global analysis works. What I want to do now is shift gears and talk a little bit in general terms about meters, and then we're going to go through the meters. And specifically, a lot of these are very straightforward. You've seen them 100 times before. The spectroscopes and the oscilloscopes and stuff like that are pretty basic. There are three that we do want to spend a little bit of time with. That's going to be the level meter, the loudness meter, and everybody's favorite, the phase scope. So let's talk in general terms about meters, then we'll come back and look at some demonstrations.